What is going on, guys? I'm Jackson, and welcome back to the Chats with Jax podcast, slash whatever this is, because I don't really have a name for it, but I'm going to say it's a podcast because I like the way podcast sounds, right? I hope you guys are all doing well, and I hope you all also are continuing to be free thinkers, because free thinkers and thinking for ourselves and being educated is what we need in the world, right? Because there's a lot of people in this world who are not free thinkers. They think based on what people tell them to think, right? you know, I'm pretty sure we all know what I'm referring to, but let's just move on. So, for today's video, I kind of want to discuss with you guys the topic of gender roles in society and why they harm us as a society, as a whole. Um, so first of all, to start off, what are gender roles? Well, typically, gender roles are male and female rooted, right? Males act a certain way, females act a certain way. Males like certain things, females like certain things. You know what I mean? And that whole thing right there is part of the problem. You know what I'm saying? So, gender roles have been instilled into human existence pretty much since the beginning of human creation, right? We would often hear of early societies following the rule of men hunt, women gather, which is basically saying that men would be the ones to go out and hunt for animals for food to bring back to their families, while women focus on gathering berries and crops and tending to their young. We've been taught that this is the way society was meant to be from an early age. And I mean this quite literally, you know, because as children, we were always taught that different things were meant for different genders. For example, let's say somebody's having a gender reveal, right? The color blue is linked to the birth of a boy. The color pink is linked to the birth of a girl. That's already one basic thing. Or when we were to ask for toys as kids, right? We would associate cars and dinosaurs with boys and toy kitchen sets and dolls for girls. Toy kitchen sets for girls. You see the problem there already? Anyway, moving on. This phenomenon actually does have a name, and it is called gender typing. So, gender typing can be defined as the process by which a person learns and adapts to behaviors, values, and characteristics that society deems appropriate for their gender. Excuse me. This way of thinking is essentially forced onto all of us as we are growing up and learning more about the world, right? It makes children develop gender based beliefs, and these beliefs are largely based on gender stereotypes. This way of teaching can negatively affect children psychologically, emotionally, and socially. Gender should be treated as something that can change based on preferences of the individual and not forced onto someone. Now that you all kind of understand the main issue, why exactly do we think the world has pushed so hard for these stereotypes and roles to be put into place? Well, it's all because of men. Okay, I'm kidding. Kinda, not really. But let me explain what I mean by that. Okay? The reason for all this is because of the natural selection. Obviously, it was kind of a natural selection occurrence, right? In the early days of human existence. As we know, women bear the womb, which can create life, right? And they would work to nurture and care for the child, while the man protects and provides for the woman and the child. Okay? Over time, this set of roles has been exploited in ways that can cause men to genuinely see women as inferior due to physical differences. The men hunt, women gather mindset may have worked back in that time where human beings literally needed to live that way to survive, and they became comfortable with it, right? Although, fun fact, a lot of women would actually go with men or by themselves to hunt, while some men would actually play the nurturer and gatherer role, which is kind of ironic, right? But anyways, some people, typically men, with more conservative views, see the way that they lived in the past as the best way to live, because if it worked for them, then it can work for us too. We've seen this way of thinking in society for many years, and we've seen women fight to be viewed as equal to men since the 1800s. We also see lots of gender stereotyping in religion. Now, to start off, I'm never going to be the one to shit on religion. I respect any type of religion you may believe in, you know. But we got to understand that a spade is a spade, right? We got to understand where these things come from and why people, feel these ways, you know, and how it has become so corrupt. But anyway, so in Christianity, for example, the story of Adam and Eve from the Bible shows that Adam, the male, was seen as the leader and the one who knows all, right? While Eve, the woman, was seen as his helper and would follow what Adam says. Because the woman can't be the leader, right? This story, along with many other teachings in the Bible, signify that men should have authority over the women in their lives, whether it be a wife or daughter. Now, like I said, I'm never going to be the one to shit on religion, because that is very disrespectful, and I agree. But this way of thinking clearly isn't only present in Christianity, and we need to be able to acknowledge that. Other Abrahamic religions follow rules like this as well, and it motivates the male followers to believe that they have a dominant role over women, while the women are meant to be meant to act subordinately and be submissive towards those men. And then the men who believe in these stereotypes will typically push these beliefs onto other males, such as their sons, who then grow up to be terrible men. Right? They will make them believe that a man who doesn't act in a hypermasculine way is a real man, and that a woman who doesn't act in a hyperfeminine way isn't a worthy woman. So, speaking of those two words, what exactly is hypermasculinity and hyperfemininity? Well, first, hypermasculine is the exaggeration of behavior that is believed to be masculine. This includes beliefs that men should compete with other men, dominate women, act aggressively, be sexually experienced, act insensitively, and present demanding behaviors, just to name a few. Hyperfeminine is the exaggeration of behavior that is believed to be feminine, right? It's the belief that women should be passive, naive, sexually inexperienced, soft, flirtatious, graceful, nurturing, and accepting. We can see some examples of this in abusive relationships between a hypermasculine and a hyperfeminine person, where the hyperfeminine person tends to endure a lot of the physical or emotional abuse of the relationship, while the hypermasculine person will typically be the abuser, As we can see, hypermasculine behavior is normally tied to males, while hyperfeminine behavior is normally tied to females. And this ties right back into the thought that one gender should be able to follow those rules of their gender in order to be seen as worthy in society. However, this in itself is also a huge stereotyping issue, to say that masculinity is only tied to males and femininity is only tied to females. Males can actually exhibit feminine energy at times, while females can exhibit masculine energy at times. For example, a male tapping into his feminine energy would often be able to be more receptive, intuitive, creative, and be able to experience more of a flow of emotions. For a female, tapping into her masculine energy can look like her being able to take more action, being more assertive, and having more structured approaches when trying to achieve her goals. It is actually quite ideal for all individuals to familiarize themselves with both their masculine and feminine sides, regardless of what gender they choose to identify with. It can improve your life in many aspects, including relationships, because being so stuck on the fact that you have to play a specific role in love has been proven to be a major sign of attachment issues. And that's a whole other thing I did a video on if you want to watch that, but, let's keep that in mind. Now, I want you guys to keep an open mind when I say what I'm about to say. Are you ready? Gender is a social construct. Oh my god! Yeah, it's not really surprising. Well, not for me at least, and people who actually aren't weird. But yes, gender is purely a social construct that was set up for us to view gender as a set of norms, quote unquote, rather than something that a person can be based on their internal preferences. These norms can make people feel like they have to constantly be placed into this box of thoughts and actions based on what society says they should do because of the gender they're externally perceived as. This is harmful to everyone, matter of fact, and sometimes we don't even realize it, Sure, there may be people who are perfectly fine with identifying as a gender they are perceived as because they happen to feel the most comfortable that way, and that's okay. However, there are other people who aren't exactly as comfortable identifying with the gender they are externally perceived as. There are some people who don't even want to identify with male or female, which is the gender binary, meaning binary to male and female, which is called gender nonconformity. And these individuals will normally want to prefer to be identified as non-binary or transgender. So, for example, I personally am comfortable with being identified as male, and I would go by he, him pronouns if someone were to ask me. A person who feels more non-binary may prefer to be identified in more gender-neutral terms and want to go by they, them pronouns. Again, it is all personal preference, and pronouns can be interchangeable depending on how that person feels. So it doesn't have to just be they, them. Somebody can go by he, they, or she, they, or whatever they choose to be whatever they choose and whatever they're comfortable with. Now, I know someone is going to want to make the argument that a person born as a specific sex should identify as that sex as well when talking about gender. And to counter that argument, I say, you are extremely fucking ignorant. Okay? Let me define gender and sex really quickly for you all, so there's no confusion between these two terms and because they get mixed up quite a bit. All right? Sex is an anatomical term used to describe a person's physical characteristics, as well as the function of their chromosomal complement. So, XX for female and XY for male, right? Gender is a social and cultural construct that describes a person's self identification as male, female, or gender nonconforming. Simply knowing the definitions of these terms allows us to understand that a person's gender is entirely up to the way they choose to self identify. Ignorance of this leads to lots of discrimination against those individuals who choose not to identify with the traditional gender binary. In the political scene today, we have seen more and more ways that non binary and transgender individuals are being erased. Simply because America wants to follow the old rule of male and female are the only two genders. Just recently, there was a video of Hunter Schafer, actress from Euphoria, by the way, talking about how she was in need of a new passport to travel. And when she received her new passport, she realized that the gender marker was changed to M, which stands for male. Hunter Schafer is not a male. Okay? So you see the issue there, right? There was also a policy signed by Trump himself to remove the T from LGBTQ+, completely ignoring the existence of transgender individuals as a whole. These are just a few of the heartbreaking examples of the widespread erasure taking place, and this erasure is literally going to take away any protections of rights that transgender and non-binary people have, simply because they don't fit into America's fucking box of conservative views. Now, I may not be a person who identifies as non-binary myself in any way, but I have enough fucking sense to understand that someone's gender expression should be free for them to decide, not for the fucking government to have a say in. Okay? I really feel deeply for those individuals who identify as transgender or non-binary that have to deal with the repercussions of these things because, basically because of other people's stupid ass actions and decisions. You know what I mean? They didn't do anything, but they're on the receiving end of the issues going on. You know what I mean? I think the best way for us to ensure the safety of our transgender and non-binary friends and family is to not forget that the reason that the government is doing all of this is to scare us into submission. The removal of transgender and non-binary identification is just the beginning of plans set by the government to minimize the rights of many other people in this country. The conservatives love to give the argument that transgenderism is a new thing, that the left is trying to force down America's throats, but fail to realize that there is years of history surrounding transgender activism, and that fact is also being heavily suppressed. Okay? According to American philosopher and feminism activist Judith Butler, they state that the right-winged ideologies that focus on suppression of transgender and non-binary existence also plan to focus on the removal of gay and lesbian rights, gay and lesbian parenting and families, women's reproductive rights, and gender-based violence, while also undermining the international protections against gender-based violence. I think that speaks for itself, These actions are used as a way to divide us all and find reasons to argue with one another over the removal of rights by the government. As we can see, the plans they have set are no longer just talk. They may have been talk before, but it's no longer just talk. These things are really happening, and we can't act like there's nothing going on when there's people actively suffering because of the push for conservative ideologies, okay? So I hope that those of you watching this video have gained a deeper understanding of what it currently means and what it could mean if stereotypical gender roles are pushed more and more like how the government is doing. We need to make sure we advocate for the rights of non-binary and transgender people, as well as women and women's reproductive rights. And, because the removal of one thing leads to another. It trickles down. So they start with transgender and non-binary people, and then they will also come on to people of color. You know what I mean? So don't ignore these things at all. It's not to be ignored. Seriously. You see why I'm sitting here in front of the microphone speaking up about it, because I think I'm very passionate about these things, because people are being silenced, and this is not a democracy. And it's crazy that, me, a citizen, has to speak up on these issues because the people that we rely on in our government aren't saying anything. They aren't doing anything. They say that they're basically letting Trump do what he wants to do and sliding with it because they're like, oh, I can't do anything about this. Yes, the fuck you can. So I'm gonna make sure I'm doing something about it, and I hope that you are too. I hope that you take this video as a sign to fight back, because it's everything that's happening right now. I'm not okay with it personally, and I don't think you should be either. But yes, that was my little ramble for the day. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that you also understand the difference between non-binary and identifying as a specific gender and all that whole argument. You know what I mean? Because I plan to educate all of you in a way that helps us all understand how we can help each other, right? Because I actually believe in a democracy that actually serves the people in the country, right? Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. This is Chats with Jax signing out.